I loved that last question you asked there, Dave, because I kind of went through something similar
Mhm. Yeah.
when my wife and I first got
Me
married
too.
and wanted
Yeah.
help.
It's like,
And
where do we turn?
she
Yeah.
wanted to go to a Christian therapist. And I was like, no, I want to go to somebody who's more, I guess, well,
Catholic.
not even
No.
Catholic. I was still kind of mixed in my head, but I wanted something more,
Yeah.
I hesitate to use the word, but secular based and maybe more scientific.
Yeah.
Because I just didn't want to pray our problems away. I really wanted to.
Yeah.
Like, what is wrong? Why are we not communicating?
Yeah.
Right? Why does she realize that I'm right all the time and she's not?
Yeah.
And that took her a long time. We never found a good therapist that realized that. So,
Yeah. It can be really challenging. It really is to find somebody that both couples or both members of the couple feel like are on their side. And that's kind of the joke that we have is like, you have a good couples therapist when they leave and they're like, whose side was it on? They both say mine. Right.
Oh,
You get that kind of that dynamic neutrality of being able to like, I can see you. I can see you. You can shift back and forth without being like two-faced, you know?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we,
No kidding.
I mean, luckily my wife, like you said, flexible, and
Yeah.
we're both pretty flexible in who we were seeing and what we were trying to find and learn, and finally found a really good resource that helped us both, and
Good.
both course corrected on our own. But that was quite a journey, and it wouldn't have made it had we not both been flexible and committed to our marriage and our relationship.
Yeah.
Because those first years are fragile.
Yes, that's the perfect word.
Everybody kind of expects that it's going to be like the movies. It's going to be moonlight and roses every day. And it's not.
No, it's like, oh my gosh, I married a whole person with flaws and annoying habits and beliefs and perspectives that are different from mine, who gets annoyed. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have to have some humility too and be like, hey, maybe I'm not perfect either.
That's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, every day I'm reminded of how my imperfections, especially from my children.
Yes, they're good at that.
yes, they are. Especially when they do things, I'm like, oh, I know where they picked up that from.
Yeah.
But
it's like a mirror, not a mirror.
This has been
marriage is the mirror too.
A really good conversation, Carl. I wanted to ask, how did you get into this particular discipline of marriage therapy?
Marriage therapy. So I went to Utah State, go Aggies, and did psychology for my undergrad. And so as part of our capstone project for my bachelor's degree, they had us look at, 3 or 4 different disciplines of therapy. And so I looked at marriage and family therapy, and I loved the systems perspective, the idea that, we don't exist in isolation, and we're so impacted by the systems that we come from, by the systems that we're immersed in. And so when I went to apply for grad school, I only applied for marriage and family therapy programs, and I have absolutely loved it ever since.
And how did you get into the interfaith part of that? Were you like at 5 years old? Were you like, I can't wait to get into interfaith relationships?
No, I
that
tripped and fell face first into this stuff. It really was like there was a vast majority of my clients that I was seeing just in my other areas of specialty that were like, oh, and I'm having this faith crisis. Oh, I found this information online that has like shaken me to my core. And so I just had to like pick it up and use some of that general stuff and then start doing the research on my own, because it's kind of a burgeoning field of research in therapy, because we've never seen rates of disaffiliation like this from religion at pretty much any other point in history. There's been a huge shift.
Yeah, the last 5 or 6 decades, I would say, across the board.
Yeah,
I've seen that kind of activity. That's incredible. How did you develop your program for helping these people? Like you mentioned, I really liked when you mentioned values, and it also, I think you mentioned, or made me think of virtues too. But how did you develop that approach?
So I started with just thinking about rituals and traditions, because when people like lose faith, not necessarily lose, I think that has a negative connotation, but transition from one faith practice, they also lose the rituals and traditions that were really important to them. And so I started working with, let's create some new ones. Let's create some new rituals and traditions. And part of that was doing like a family coat of arms, or like, here's our own family proclamation for a lot of my clients that practice the LDS religion. We want to create a unique identifier for what kind of experiences do we want to have in this family. If, somebody were to say, oh, the Lebaron family, and then fill in the blank, like, what are the virtues? What are the qualities that we want to stand out? And that can be completely a-religious. I think that's the beauty of it, is we take some of that emotional reactivity away when we just talk about, well, what's good? Do you know good people within and without religion? Yeah. So let's focus on the things that make people good instead of on the religious things that we feel like we should be doing because that's good. Yes, that's a type of good. That's great.
That's interesting. You shift from the judgmental to the more values focused, and how I like how you said, like, because people can still have values outside of a religious practice.
Yeah,
I would think most people hopefully are intrinsically good and want to have good relationships and good communities.
Yeah. And that's what I remind my clients a lot of, is that there's a difference between spirituality and religious practice. I think spirituality is an inherent part of our personhood. Like, we have a desire and a drive to connect to something bigger than ourselves. And so we talk about how you can still be a spiritual person even if you don't have a religious practice. Spirituality is like the journey and the destination, and the religion is more like the vehicle. Some people like to drive, some people like to walk. But if we're on the same journey, if we're on the same path, then we've got a lot of crossover. We have a lot of similarity. And then I like to think that, loving deity or deities are going to give us a little bit of grace, that once we reach the end of that journey, that we've done the best that we can to be good and to be good to each other.
Do you find it's easier to work with a couple who's been on the same faith and then one leaves for a similar faith? Or, because it sounds like you're mentioning a lot of people are having crisis where they're just leaving. But what about the people who are together when they get married, but then one's like, what, I'm actually going to go cross over to this other faith?
That happens maybe 10 to 20% of the people that I counsel. I think it's really similar still, because I think there is a devotion, and I really like that word, like a devotion to the marital faith practice, that even if you transition to something very similar, can still feel like a betrayal. And so it's the same kind of concepts that we talk about, this openness, this respect, this acceptance of choice, this, like, I'm going to practice what I practice, you practice what you practice. And here's all of the places that we still overlap. Here's all of the good that we can still bring as a couple.
Yeah. Wow.
Flexibility.
Yes, flexibility.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Word of the day.
Well, that's all I got for questions.
Yeah, man, Carly, I really feel like this is going to, be really helpful for a lot of people. So thank you again for coming on.
My pleasure. Oh, I would love to. This has been a blast.
Thanks for joining us today. Hey, do us a favor and take a few minutes to subscribe to our podcast and the Utah Marriage Commission YouTube channel, where you can watch this and every episode of the show. When you hit the like button and leave a comment, your feedback helps us improve the show. And don't forget to share this episode with a friend. You can also follow and connect with us on Instagram at Stronger Marriage Life and on Facebook at Stronger Marriage. Be sure to share with us what topics you want us to explore or what you loved about today's episode. If you want even more resources to improve your relationship connection, visit our website at strongermarriage.org, where you'll find free workshops, webinars, relationship surveys, and more. Each episode of Stronger Marriage Connection is hosted and sponsored by the Utah Marriage Commission at Utah State University. And finally, a big thanks to our producers Rex Polanis and Alexis Alcott and the team at Utah State University. And you, our audience. You make this show possible. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the views of the Utah Marriage Commission